So I'm here as head of the International Competition Jury, and also just to say some interesting things about where we find ourselves now in the second century of cinema. I don't believe anything we've learned in the last 100 years about film applies anymore. Not how we make them, not how we watch them, not how we finance them, not how we pay for them. Everything we've assumed true over the last 100 years of theater, of motion pictures, is under challenge and is changing. And I have been making an effort to change with it. So a few years ago, Bret Easton Ellis and I did a film where we raised the money on the web, we cast the film on the web, and we sold and distributed it on the web. It's a film called Canyons, and we just did it ourselves, and we made money on it. And then the next film I did, I had an unfortunate turn of events, but now I'm going to start a film where I'm trying to tackle the new world of film exhibition and financing, and that is I'm doing a web series, which is
Yes.
It's going to be like a feature film, but it's 10-minute segments. So 10-minute segments that you'll be able to watch as a feature film, say at a festival, but it will be released on the web in 10-minute increments. And this goes to the heart of what is changing about motion pictures. The whole notion of a projected image in a dark room for a paying audience is now changing. And I believe that's a 20th century notion, and I think it's an old-fashioned notion. Yeah, so now we're seeing the rise of new concepts, and the film studios of the future are going to be called Amazon and Google, and already are called Netflix. And this is where filmmaking and film going is headed. And this new idea, we pitched to a number of people, and none of the people we approached had any kind of experience in filmmaking. They're all from other areas, and in internet areas, and from Silicon Valley. And we were talking about this idea and how we were going to distribute it, and one of them said to me, well, it's not going to be ready for a year yet. We're going to shoot it in the spring, it'll all be ready next summer. By next summer, who knows? We can't tell you how we're going to distribute something next summer because it'll be different. That's how quickly the world we live in is changing. This idea, which is called Life from the Other Side, I got it because I was thinking about La Dolce Vita. And I thought to myself, if Fellini was alive today, he'd make La Dolce Vita as a web series. That's what it is. It's not really a 3-hour movie. It's just this whole series of episodes. And maybe that's the better way to make it than to try to make it as a 3-hour movie. And so we're entering into a new era where so much of the old rules, not only rules of exhibition, but also rules of length are changing. We don't know how long a film is anymore. We used to think it was between an hour and a half and 2 hours. But now it's somewhere between 3 minutes and 70 hours. Mad Men is a movie, all 70 hours of it, as is that one with the cat on the piano, all 3 minutes of it. They are equal movies now in our new consumer notion of audiovisual entertainment. If you're not afraid of trying something the whole idea right now is, what new can we try? How can we get people out of the house? There's no reason to leave your house to go to a movie anymore unless there's unless the people are actually showing you something that you want to leave the house for. And so we're seeing all the kind of conventional dramas, dying up because they're better suited for the home. And what's left for the theaters is special events or children's movies or stuff like that. And as a result, in the United States in particular, much of the writing talent is now migrating toward television and the internet. Now, television isn't really the best word for it anymore because it's not really television. It's a new thing we created that is on screens everywhere, and it doesn't really, it doesn't come through the cable. It comes through the air, and you can watch it on your watch, and you can watch it on your phone, and you can watch it on the side of a building. Well, that's sort of the world we're in, and it's a very exciting story. Stories can be told in these new forms, and to use the word television, it sort of belittles them because maybe somebody will come up with a better word for this thing we're doing now. That's what I love about the 29 thing, where everything is being projected everywhere. So that's just sort of introductory comments about the very peculiar place we find ourselves 100 years in. 100 years ago, they were making 10-minute films, and they were called one-reelers and serials, and now we're making them again.
Arthur Miller soleva decir que eran todos sus hijos. ¿Cuál es su hijo preferido?
Well, Truffaut had an answer when they asked him that question. He would say that when I'm writing, I like directing best. When I'm directing, I like editing best. And when I'm editing, I like writing best. Mostly what we do is, try to raise money. I teach from time to time, and when I do, I warn the students. I said, in this class, we're going to study the 10% of filmmaking that is not film financing. I know, but I just gave away how old-fashioned I am, because you are now moving into a time where you can make anything you want. We used to talk about a camera stilo, but the pen always costs $1 million. Well, now the pen costs about $5,000, and all sorts of films are getting made now that would never have been made in the past. And this is good and bad, because in the past 100 years, movies basically were run by the capitalist system. If you would pay to see a movie, we would make it for you. Movies have only known capitalism. Now we are into the post-capitalist system, which means that movies are like poetry or songs or paintings, and anybody can do it, and you don't have to have economic justification. And it is now possible to make so many movies that no one can possibly see them, in the same way that there's so many songs and so many paintings. And so on one hand, we have created an enormous democratic engine for everybody to make a film. And on the other hand, we have no mechanism, really, by which to sort them out or to monetize them. So it's a classic case of the best of times, worst of times situation.
Una pregunta imaginaria sin relación con la realidad. ¿Qué opinaría usted o qué opina usted de un país y de una industria cinematográfica que tienen armas suficientes para impedirle a un director hablar de la película que hace?
That has to do with a contract. And every filmmaker, when you make a film, you sign a piece of paper that says, I'm not going to say anything bad about my film. And everybody signs it, and So I'm the one who who agreed to the rule.
El señor Schrader ha comentado que el talento en los Estados Unidos está emigrando a la televisión, o como se dice, o al Internet. Me pregunto si parte del talento de los Estados Unidos, también en plan profesional, está emigrando al extranjero. Fuera de los Estados Unidos, por ejemplo, en México, en Argentina, existe otro sistema de financiar al cine, un sistema de subvenciones, de deducciones fiscales, de tax breaks.
Yeah, well, there is many different ways of financing movies now. You can actually make a film on your phone, and so it is such a puzzling world, because on one hand, the kinds of films that you can make on your phone, are everybody can do it, but they're not the kind of films that people want to steal and pirate. And so on one hand, you have piracy, which is destroying the big budget film. On the other hand, you have total anarchy, which is making films that people don't want to steal.
Sí, le queríamos preguntar dos cosas cortitas. Una es, ¿cuál es la pasión humana que más le interesa filmar? Y la segunda es ahora en la instancia de jurado, si tiene algún criterio que privilegia a la hora de evaluar una película, tanto en cuanto director como guionista. Gracias.
Films like any other sort of art make up their own rules, and you can say, I like a certain kind of film, and then you see a different one and you say, wow. And so part of the fun of watching films is also the same part of fun of making films, which is doing things in a different way. And of course, there is a lot of money invested in making sure that people don't do things in a different way. But part of the fun is finding the different ways, and which is why the festival world are becoming the new curators of art.
Yo quería preguntar respecto a lo que estaba diciendo y expandiéndolo un poco. Recuerdo hace unos meses, Spielberg y Lucas dijeron que la industria blockbuster estaba llegando a una especie de implosión. Iba a llegar a un punto donde las grandes películas iban a empezar a fracasar. Quería preguntarle si lo que usted piensa, que ese fracaso del blockbuster va a ser el que dé paso a la industria del Internet, al repunte de la industria del Internet, del VOD, de las ventas, o sea, de las series por Internet o bajo demanda.
First, George was sort of misquoted. What George and Stephen were saying was it was a simple, obvious fact, is we're making too many of these big things, and the bubble's going to burst. That's just simple common sense. When you make too many westerns start losing money. And we're making too many big cartoon movies, and so they're going to start losing money. But the bigger issue is essentially the one under piracy. We have not yet experienced the full power of torrent. And when that happens, how are big budget films going to survive? We don't know. You take the music industry, there's just as many songs being played and listened to now as ever. But in the shift from brick and mortar to digital, 75% of the money is off the table. There's 75% less money in the music business than there was 20 years ago. Well, music can kind of survive because it doesn't take a lot of money to make music. You make it in your living room and mix it on your computer and distribute it on your computer. But how do you make big period spectacles when piracy is rampant? And we're not there yet, but we're getting closer and closer to that day when the ship hits the iceberg. Already starting to see this happen. The large budget, serious film is not being made anymore. We don't make Godfather anymore. We don't make Chinatown. Barry Levinson recently said in an interview he couldn't get Rain Man financed anymore because those films are not enough to get people to come out of their houses. And so those films, that audience is now being taken care of through long form, shall we say, television, but long form drama. The only things that people come out of the house for are things that require a public event. So it's already happening. And sadly, what we're losing in the theaters are the large budget serious films. You know, they're just not being made anymore. I was remarking yesterday that, because I saw the film that Viggo Mortensen was in, and the film before that one was called Two Faces of January. It was from a Patricia Hitchcock novel, and I said that's a perfect example of the kind of film we don't make anymore. A classy, expensive, period thriller, we just don't make it because we don't have that audience anymore.
Usted dijo que su próxima película la está desarrollando para una plataforma web o en ese formato, y quería saber cuál sería la manera, pues usted también habló del negocio, ¿no? Que uno hace películas para ganar dinero. ¿Cuál es la manera de ganar dinero en ese formato web? Si, digamos, sería una plataforma paga como Netflix o hay algún otro modo.
The two scariest words in motion pictures, if you want to make a horror film, here's the title for you. The two scariest words are revenue collection. I mean, we're exploring all kinds of new ways to collect revenue because, and so you get subscription systems and you get individual systems. Some of it comes through product, you know. I was just talking to somebody, you know, about short films that are being made by people like BMW or you know, Louis Vuitton, and they don't even have to be commercials. They could just say BMW presents, and that's another way. So this entire world of how to monetize, we don't understand. But there are people getting very, very rich, and they're not artists. You know, the people who run these cable companies are, believe me, they're all getting real rich right now. And at the same time, they're saying there's no money for the artists. Is it possible to monetize your own self? I think it's becoming more and more possible to actually create and sell yourself. You know, and if I were young, you know, if I were in college, that's the world I would be investigating. How to monetize your work without giving most of the money to the thugs who are, you know, controlling the airwaves. And believe me, and all this talk about net neutrality and all that, most of it is about trying to suppress not only freedom of expression, but also economic freedom, because the rich want to control the internet in the same way they control everything else. And just because it seems to be free isn't mean it's free. And people have to fight to make it free.
¿Qué es lo que más aprendió trabajando con Martin Scorsese?
I wrote 4 films that Marty did, and eventually we stopped because I was thinking too much like a director, and he wanted me to think more and more like a writer. What did I ever learn from Marty? Probably not anything very flattering. Marty is a very determined businessman, and I've learned a lot just watching how he works. But also, everything I say, I'm going to say sort of isn't true. If I say, well, Marty is completely free, he's not completely free. So I don't know the answer.
Me gustaría que comentara en este nuevo ámbito, en este nuevo mundo de la digitalización y el aire, y dentro de el dilema que significa este control de los airwaves. ¿Qué ve en estas nuevas formas en Latinoamérica para hacer frente a estas cuestiones?
Gracias. Well, Hollywood isn't making these big films for Americans. Americans don't really care much for them. Those Batman and Spider-Man movies, they're being made for the Chinese and for the Russians. Less than half, maybe only 40% of their box office is coming from America anymore. We are making international, content-less ephemera for a worldwide audience. And one of the reasons that the writing is so bad is that most of the people we're making these films for don't even speak the language of the filmmakers. And so I'm just saying, don't confuse what Hollywood is doing with what America is doing. Hollywood is a kind of international conglomerate business, and you are as much a part of it as everyone else in the world, And, the fact that Interstellar is, showing at the Paseo has as much to do with South America as it does to do with America, because that you're making Interstellar as an event movie for the world, and how cinema survives apart from that. In the U.S., it's starting to survive in the smaller cinemas and in the airwave cinemas. That's a way to describe it. When you have countries that do have subsidies, it is possible to encourage small, serious films in Europe in a way that we can't do here. We can't do it in the United States. I thought I would never say this, because when I was a young man, I thought the only place for an artist to be making motion pictures was in the United States, because it had the most freedom, the most money, and the most opportunity. I look at the world now, and I don't think the U.S. is the best place to be making movies anymore.
Con todos estos cambios tecnológicos que estuvimos hablando, ¿cuál sería a la hora de organizar un guión, por ahí en lo que era antes, 3 horas de un público cautivo en una película, ahora son, supongamos, estos short films, estos cortos de 10 minutos, en el cual hay que captar a ese público? ¿En qué cambiaría eso en el armado del guión, que es como un nuevo concepto? Y después, un poco relacionado con esto, y como segunda pregunta un poco, ¿cuál cree que ha sido su formación como guionistas? ¿Cuáles son los tips o los maestros o los consejos que le han servido?
Yeah, this is a very, very good question. And it goes to the heart of writing, film writing today. The three-act notion of a drama has defined movies for almost their entire existence. We are now starting to see a breakdown of that three-act structure, that hour and a half, 2-hour film. And one of the things you learn when you start writing episodic television is that the third act doesn't come at the end, it comes in the middle. Because the dramatic cadence is different. And I think one of the exciting things that's happening in the world cinema now is that we're seeing the collapse of this old form of drama, and we're seeing new dramatic pacing. I shot a film in Romania, and I was discussing with a Romanian cinematographer, and he said to me, he was part of the new Romanian wave, he said, I don't like American movies because you always know what's going to happen. Whereas in our films, almost anything can happen. And that is a byproduct of the breakdown of the convention, of the old conventions of narrative, and where you can have these new narrative patterns. And I think it's a terrific thing that people, and they're being taught by films now, they're being taught new narrative patterns. Don't believe what they tell you about screenwriting in books and in class. There's a lot of people who have an investment in an old system, and they'll tell you, oh, this is how you should do a painting, or this is how you should write a script. There's only one person who can teach you how to write a script, and that's the person that you're telling the story to. And the rules are completely up there. And it's just so frustrating to see and talk to the students who have been taught how to write a script from this book that was written for another time and another place. Film schools are hurting students more than they're helping them.
Paul Schrader ha escrito sobre el estilo trascendental en el cine. Entonces, a mí me gustaría preguntarle cómo piensa, luego del paso de los años, estas ideas en las que pensó, sobre todo en el panorama que acaba de describir, y si hay cineastas o algunas zonas dentro de la cinematografía mundial donde este estilo se pueda ver según su criterio. Gracias.
45 years ago, I wrote a book on transcendental style, on Ozu and Bresson and Dreyer. I never tried to work in that style myself. I think it's about time I give it a try. I'm starting and getting old enough and confident enough, maybe I should try it. The cinema of austerity is a very difficult one. And you see people trying it. And occasionally a film comes across that works, like the Polish film Ida, or Derogatis' film about the Amish in Mexico. But for every one quiet film that works, there's 10 films that are just... So it's a very hard form because movies move. That's why we call them movies. They move, and they're about action, and they're about sexuality and empathy. And so when you make a film that's about inaction, you are doing the thing that movies do worst. And you have to be awfully good to pull it off.
Quería hacer dos preguntas específicamente sobre su carrera como director. La primera es cómo fue trabajar con Giorgio Moroder en Cat People, y la segunda, que nos cuente el proceso de filmación o lo que quiera al respecto de Like Sleeper, que para mí es su mejor película.
The first question was about Giorgio Moroder, and I have loved to work with musicians who are not that experienced in movies because they're always trying to solve problems for the first time. So I've worked with Jack Nietzsche and Giorgio Moroder and Philip Glass and David Grohl, a number of others, and part of the fun was coming up with a musical solution to a problem. Whereas when you work with an old-time composer who's done 30 or 40 films, he knows pretty much all the musical answers already, and so often he's not coming up with new solutions. So if you have the patience to work with a musician who is not experienced in film, you can get some exciting things. To me, like some of the most interesting scores the last few years were done by what's his name from Nine Inch Nails?
Trent Reznor.
Yeah, Reznor.
Trent Reznor.
Yeah. So yeah, it's always fun to grab people who are figuring it out, like Giorgio was. Yeah, and then you asked about Light Sleeper, which is a film I like a lot. I just find it a very personal film to me. But I was thinking of a way to wrap this up, because this is such a hard conversation. They say you can never write a great novel about a revolution during the revolution. And in some ways, it's hard to have a good conversation about a technological revolution when you're in the middle of a technological revolution. But I don't think this technical revolution is ever going to end. I don't think we're ever going to have a 100-year period of cinema again. I think all we ever will see from now on out is constant change, and that every device you get will be obsolete by the time you open the box. And that's the world we're living in, where we're living in a world where part of you wants to say, well, let's see where this is heading and let's wait. And the other part of you realizes that there's never going to be a time to wait, because it's just going to keep heading there faster and faster. The young people in this room will live to see a technological world that none of us can imagine 50 years from now. None of us. I mean, in the next 20 years, more is going to happen than has in the last 100. Who knows what's going to happen? Buckle up. It's going to be something else.
Sí, teniendo en cuenta el cambio paradigmático que tiene el público del cine, como venía sosteniendo antes, y con la revolución tecnológica que se viene en los próximos 50 años, ¿cómo se ve usted volviendo a dirigir o escribiendo para televisión o para las plataformas tecnológicas que se vienen, esa forma de ver televisión en cualquier lugar del mundo, en cualquier momento?
Yeah, I mean, if I were your age, what would I be doing? I don't know. Maybe I'd be writing code. Maybe, that's where the real creativity is now occurring, rather than the other forms of narrative. It's a fascinating question. And how would I try to figure out, how old are you? What, 24?
¿Cuántos años tenés?
23? If I were 23 and I was saying, how can I tell a story now? Boy, that's a great question. And you're going to have to answer it, because I don't have the answer. It isn't just the media that's changing. We're changing. Our technology is changing how we perceive. So the movie I see at the age of 68 is no longer the movie that you see at the age of 23, because your brain has been retrained and rewired by the media in a way that mine hasn't been. And so you gotta have to come up with a story for that new brain of yours. One of the things I'm thinking of doing, talking with some people, I'm kind of interested in trying to expand the boundaries of what cinema is. Now, you know, we have these systems now, 4DX, which I don't know if you have them in this country. You know what 4DX is? It's essentially a motion control chair where the movie experience is a ride, and you can have balance, and it changes the atmosphere around you and everything. We're trying to create these unique experiences that you cannot have at home. And I've been working on trying to do an ayahuasca movie where, like, you would put on gloves and booties and sit in this environment, and it would, you know, it would, and you as the writer would be writing. You could eventually, what we want to do is not fool around with your eyeballs and your ears, because that's also old-fashioned. You say, shoot our stories right into your neural system. That's where the new stories are going to go. Aldous Huxley said it a long time ago. You know, the next movie you make, you know, the movie you make 30 years from now may be, in fact, a pill.
Le quería preguntar cuál es su balance final de un proyecto que fue tan peculiar como The Canyons. Gracias.
I was friends with Bret Easton Ellis, who's a novelist, and, you know, we were sort of frustrated, and the conversation was, you know, we spend so much of our time hustling like whores to get these people's money, and it never works out. The technology is changing. Why don't we just do it ourselves and see what happens? That's how it started. You know, so I said to Bret, you write it, I'll direct it. Since we sort of have names, we can raise some money. So we raised $170,000 on Kickstarter, and then we put in $90,000 of our own, and then the rest was deferred. We did the casting through the internet. We did the fundraising through the internet. We got locations through the internet. We eventually distributed it through the internet. And it was really an exciting thing to do once. Looking back at it, I don't know how exciting it would be to do it again, particularly at my age. But it was one of the things I wanted to do when I did it was to see whether it could actually be done. And I said, you know, I've been talking about pulling something like this off for somebody else, but why don't I try it? So that's what happened. And there's no other way we could have made that film. I mean, no one will let Lindsay Lohan be in a movie because she can't get insured, but we were paying for it ourselves, so why not? And the other star was from pornography. No one would have hired him, but Bret said, you know, I think this character is like James Dean, that porn star. And so, of course, it's our money, and we could just do it. And then maybe I'll end up in that place again, particularly after that.
Venís hablando de la tecnología y de los avances y de las nuevas formas narrativas. Hay una sola cosa que no nombraste y que me gustaría que nos cuentes cómo es tu relación con ella, y son los videojuegos.
Movies have been the most passive art form ever. You don't have to do anything to see a movie. You don't even have to stay awake. Younger generations are growing up with a form of participation in audiovisual experience, and the passivity is being challenged, and that's great. And the idea of tweeting while you watch a movie to somebody else who was watching the same movie and reading each other's tweets while you were watching, or watching a movie here and having another screen there, I think that's all very cool. And I think it's a cool thing for people to become more active in the experience. And this hit me when I was watching Whitney Houston's funeral on television, on the computer rather. And they had her funeral live here, and then over here you could watch any of her videos simultaneously. And then they had a running Twitter feed of all the people around the world reacting to watching the funeral while you're watching it. And some of those reactions were not very kind. And so there you are, you're having this multiple experience. You're watching this funeral and you're seeing her videos and you're reading all these nasty comments in the Twitter feed. And I just thought that was great.